Welcome to the Old Men of the Three Things with JJ Redick and Tim Legler. Legs, how we doing? I just to let everybody know I'm a little bit under the weather with my voice, and I apologize. I think it might be just fucking travel. But woke up this morning at 4:15 to get to a 6 a.m. flight in Indy, and I'm back. I'm here, back in the studio. First of all, I want to talk. We're going to talk three series. We're going to talk Denver, Minnesota, Indiana, New York, OKC, Dallas. But you called Game 3 in Minnesota.
Man.
Look at you. You're a legend in all facets. How was that for you?
It was awesome. I love calling games. I called a bunch. I mean, over the first probably half of my career at ESPN, I called a ton of games, been less and less over the last, 10 years or so. I love doing them. This was a big spot, great game to call. Unfortunately for Minnesota, that, there was no energy for them in that game. It was interesting because, going into that game, Minnesota's up 2-0. They come home. We all witnessed a complete domination and suffocation defensively. We all saw it in Game 2. So we're wondering how Denver's going to get back into this series. How are they going to be able to, run their offense, generate their offense? Mike Malone said before the game, he was much more concerned about their offense than he was their defense. And how they were going to score against that team. And then they come out and they just take it right to them. JJ, I've never actually felt worse for a group of about 20,000 people that were in that building, just because they were ready to blow the roof off the place. You could feel the vibe all day in the city. I was out and about. You could just see how ready this city was, to win their first home game in the series, to get up 3-0, probably put a stranglehold on the series. And Denver never gave that a chance. And they just never had an opportunity. The entire second half, the building was dead. Denver obviously at one point built up a 30-point lead. They win the game. And then obviously that leads us to yesterday and the response that we were expecting to get out of Minnesota in Game 4.
Let's talk about that offense. Let's talk about some of the adjustments that Michael Malone made in Games 3 and 4. What did you see both in Game 3 and then yesterday?
I thought yesterday in particular was important for me because I almost expected that kind of response from Denver in Game 3. Like, you knew that you were going to get their absolute best punch, and Minnesota didn't play very well. So it was a combination of a perfect storm, and Denver has the big win. So yesterday I thought was going to be more indicative maybe of how the rest of this series will go. They got back to the basics. I thought their entire offensive operation in Game 4 was just utilizing two-man game with a lot of times an empty side of the floor and making very simple reads out of it. Jamal Murray bounced back in a huge way in these last two games. You cannot give him enough credit. I mean, not only did he not play well in the first two games, he had the controversy surrounding him. Was he going to be suspended? Wasn't he? He wasn't. He came in. He's public enemy number one going into those two games. You cannot say enough about the way he bounced back. Sensational offensively in Game 3. Picked his spots in Game 4, but the times that he was great in Game 4 allowed them to keep separation with Minnesota. But it was basic basketball, JJ. They got back to playing with poise and being strong and being sure and not being weak with the basketball, not catching the ball at advantageous spots on the floor for Minnesota. They got the pace back. Michael Malone told us before Game 3, the number one thing he was looking for, have the ball cross half court in 3 seconds. And they did a lot of that. And what that does is get Minnesota, off of them, create some space, back them up a little bit. And now you can play real basketball, where you're not just fighting for your life to handle the ball and getting stripped the way they were in Game 2. Once they got Minnesota back on their heels over half court, now they could go into their stuff. Their screening was significantly better, but it was basic reads and guys not trying to do more than they were capable of off the bounce and making Minnesota pay for their overreaction to things. Crisp passes from one side of the floor to the other, ball reversals. Much stronger with the ball off the dribble. But I think they just all simplified how they were playing. Make the quick read. Minnesota's got length. They're going to jump in your passing lanes. They're going to jump in your driving lanes. They're going to show you all kinds of arms and activity. You can't take that extra dribble. You've got to pick it up before you get yourself in a position. You can't get it out of there. And I just thought they did a great job of that in both games. where that ball was precisely kicked out. One pass and then a second pass. In some cases, it was, directly cross court to an open man, whether he shot it or attacked the closeout guy. Everything slowed down for Denver once they got the pressure off of them. And that's really what this came down to, because we all saw what happened in game two. It was futile what they were doing, and it was embarrassing. Mike Malone's own words. It was. And they had to figure out a way, relieve the pressure, and let us go execute our sets with better screening, high basketball IQ, and play with the poise that we're used to. And that's what I saw pretty much all of the last two games.
I'm going to get to the pressure in a second, but I think it's an important point you're making, which is, Denver's going to play their way, and they certainly made some tweaks. You brought up the empty side stuff. There was a lot of times in that two-man game where they had a clear wing instead of having two guys on the wing with a single side on the weak side. They now had more space for Murray to operate, because instead of having two guys on the side he was come off of, they only had one guy, right? So there's just more space for him, which of course means more space for Jokic, right? So they mixed up where Aaron Gordon was and the dunker shots. Sometimes he's spacing. It's like those small tweaks are important, right? And Denver's going to run their stuff. They were crisper. They created more advantages. That's where we get into this swing action where they're reversing the ball, skipping the ball. All of a sudden you're attacking closeouts. You're getting open threes. You're making the extra pass. All of that stuff. But it's like it's a little bit of a puzzle to solve against the Minnesota Timberwolves in that, how do we create the advantage, right? One of the things that I think is very relevant to this series, but across the board in these playoffs, and we'll get to it our next series too, across the board in our playoffs, this is a trend that I've seen. Offenses need multiple ball handlers on the floor. They need multiple guys who can bring the ball up and initiate offense, and defenses need multiple guys who can pick up full court. Why? Well, let's go. Jalen Brunson, right? Jamal Murray. Like, these guys are getting hounded. Ball goes in the basket, picking up full court. Ball being taken out on the side, picking up full court. These defenders, teams that have these defenders like Minnesota, like Indiana right now, they're throwing Philly in the first round against Brunson. They're throwing multiple bodies, pick up full court, and you hope that takes its toll, that it wears you down a little bit, right? So if you're thinking about like a playoff roster construction, hey, you need multiple ball handlers and you need multiple defenders who can pick up full court. I'm not going to be that guy, Tim. I need to be on, if I'm one of the five on the court, I need two other guys that can pick up full court, because it's not going to be me.
Right.
And why is this relevant to Minnesota and Denver? Well, we saw what happened in game two, right? We saw the pressure they put on Jamal Murray. We saw the pickup points with Jamal Murray. That takes its toll. I said this to Tommy on Thursday when we were doing our Old Man the Three intro about this series, and I said, if you're looking at Denver, how do you relieve some of that pressure? Well, it's probably not Michael Porter Jr. bringing the ball up. Certainly Jokic could do it if he gets a defensive rebound. It's probably not KCP bringing the ball up. The guy that can bring the ball up and initiate offense is Aaron Gordon. Yesterday, he initiated offense on 27 possessions. And what does that do for Jamal Murray? Jamal Murray's now off the ball. He's conserving energy. And then when you get into the zoom screen or the rub screen, into the dribble handoff game, into the two-man action, right? He's got a fresh start, right? He's not having to bring the ball up for 45 feet, get off it, go get to a spot, right? He can just initiate offense. And they had a ton of success with those dribble handoffs. This is a problem right now for the New York Knicks. It is. We're going to get to more of this in a second, but this is an important trend right now in the playoffs, right? Dallas has this. Dallas has Kyrie. Dallas has Luka. Luka's getting hounded by Lou Dort at times. Hey, just inbound the ball over there to Kyrie. Kyrie has it a few possessions. Hey, okay, I'm good. This guy's, Jalen Williams has been fucking bothering me for the last 3 possessions. All right, Luka, you bring it up. Right? OKC has those defenders. Dallas has those defenders. This is an important part of the playoffs right now. Is this just pick up full court? If you even go back, those Bulls runs, right, in the 90s, think about Ron Harper, Scottie Pippen, MJ at times. Kobe did this for the Lakers, right? You get to the playoffs and you're picking up full court and you're hoping you're wearing down teams You brought up the getting across half court. You're not getting across half court in 2 or 3 seconds. You're getting across half court in 5 or 6 seconds, right? Now you're not getting into your offense in a timely manner. Now you're late clock on your second option. Instead of being at 11 on your second option, you're at 6. All that stuff certainly matters. And it matters in this series. And I like the adjustment from Denver. Gordon bringing the ball up. I like it.
Yeah, it was big, particularly in the second half. It's just first of all, not to mention the fact, by the way, let's go convert every single field goal opportunity we get when we're off the ball the way Aaron Gordon did. Some of his reads on his late flashes along the baseline were unbelievable. Now they're incredible finds. And the passing is what you notice most.
That's such a two-man field to me. Like it's
totally.
Everybody's like, Jokic. And by the way, Jokic, incredible passing for sure. But the timing and the reads from Gordon all season long, last season too, like they've just figured out this perfect synergy.
So to your point, JJ, we talk about all the time about two-man combinations, like guard, big man usually, or we'll talk about backcourts, like the importance of backcourts and tandeming guys together. I think there's a really important relationship on the court that exists between a power forward and a center. That because of the spaces that they occupy and the way that their games offensively complement each other, I think this is about as good as it gets, as you'll ever going to see in this league. What Aaron Gordon, that's why he was the perfect pickup, the perfect addition to this group. His defense, toughness, rebounding, smarts, all things are great. But the way that he reads Nikola Jokic and the way that those two guys play together in making you pay in that area of the floor as often as they do, and what that does to a defense and the doubt that it creates and the number of guys that are now kind of looking over their shoulders, sinking, and now that's going to lead to an open three because of you're so worried about that connection from Jokic to Aaron Gordon, lurking along the baseline. And it was never more so than yesterday. Like just watching those two guys together and the way that they play together and Gordon's ability to handle the basketball, you're 100% right. Second half was a big part of it. Second thing I noticed about this game, there were some opportunities Minnesota had that I thought were critical, even if it was a possession or two, where you're thinking, okay, were they going to make the run all the way back? I don't know, but they certainly could have got it, I think, to a one-possession game if on a certain handful of possessions they had been smarter defensively or offensively. And I thought, actually, JJ, the close to the half was enormous. So and let's walk you through that. It's a 7-point game. Denver's got the basketball. Jokic slips to the rim. They called Gobert for that hold when he slipped. I thought it was a terrible call. I watched the replay. There was a tiny little bit of a grab sort of his wrist, but for the most part, Gobert's hands are back. Jokic back cuts from the top of the key down the lane. They throw the pass. It's out in front of him. It's a turnover. It's a steal. Minnesota's going to be down 7 with the basketball going the other way with 30 seconds left in the half. Instead, they call that foul. What happens right after that? KCP makes a 3. Then they throw the ball away, in the half court area. Jamal Murray intercepts it. Makes a 50-foot bomb at the half. I mean, you talk about a turn of events. So just like that, you go in down 15. It's a 7-point game, and you have the ball. And in a matter of 34 seconds, you are down 15 going into the locker room. I thought that was a big possession. There was another possession earlier. Anthony Edwards hits a 3. I think they cut it to 7. And you think, okay, this is plenty of time left. Very next possession, they come up the court. Karl-Anthony Towns decides he's going to run out and pressure Aaron Gordon on the ball, 55, 60 feet from the basket. Aaron Gordon just crossover, goes right by him, goes downhill. They pinch off the corner, kick out. Justin Holiday made 3 within 5-7 seconds of Anthony Edwards hitting that 3. And just like that, people stand up on the Edwards 3. They sit back down again 7 seconds later. And I felt there was a series of those types of momentum changers. Again, Denver was so good, so crisp. I don't think Minnesota's coming all the way back, but I don't think they gave themselves the best chance either to make Denver feel like a real threat in the last, 3, 4, 5 minutes of the game. And some of that was just incredible execution on the part of Denver. Some of it was, I thought, a lack of poise on the part of Minnesota with some mistakes defensively, some unnecessary fouling. I thought there were a couple of really quick shots, not even by Edwards. He had the right to take whatever shot he wanted. By other guys, like quick shots that were not great looks. All of that adds up to you're not going to be able to make up that kind of ground against a team like Denver when they're playing well. You have to almost pitch a perfect game from the time you got down 15 to get back in it. The way Denver was playing, and Minnesota, I thought, lost out on some opportunities to do that. And now this is crazy. After what we saw in game 2, JJ, did you think we'd be sitting here at 2-2 after what we all watched game 2 look like, especially that second quarter?
I certainly did not expect Minnesota to sweep. I'm terrible at predictions. I don't like predicting things.
I don't either, but I mean, but when you thought when they left?
I've talked all season like about this potential matchup, and we did it at length prior to the series. I wasn't surprised Minnesota was up 2-0. I would have been surprised if we were sitting here doing this, talking about Minnesota in the conference finals after winning 4-0.
No, I agree. Look, I picked Denver in 7 to win this series. After game 2, I certainly didn't think Denver was going to get swept. But the way Minnesota clamped them down in that game, and just like all of them they look like they were in a state of shock that happened. And you're thinking, okay, look, I know it's not going to look like this going forward to Minneapolis, but you think Minnesota going home, having played that well, that they're going to get one of these 2 games, and most likely would have been game 4, because you would have expected Denver not to go down 3-0. So Denver wins game 3. You're thinking, okay, Minnesota's going to at least get a split at home. But the way Denver carved them up offensively yesterday, their defense has not been a factor in the last 2 games. It just has not bothered Denver at all. They got back to a place of balance and strength and comfort and getting space and playing quicker. And they're much more certain of what they're doing. And you can just see the shift in their demeanor. They look now like they're thinking like, okay, we got this figured out. This isn't going to be a problem for us going forward. That's the way they operated in these last 2 games.
One point I wanted to make is just, and you brought this up at the end of the first half of yesterday's game, just the importance, and people talk about this all the time. You've obviously called a bunch of games and know this from being in some of these coaches' meetings prior to. Like, it's amazing how much emphasis coaches put on it, finishing quarters, starting quarters, right? Yep. And it's these little small windows. It could be a minute, could be 45 seconds. It could be the first 2.5 minutes while you get your best player a breather at the start of the second or the start of the fourth. And those little tiny windows of the game can have a profound effect on the outcome. And, a guy subs in with a minute 15, checking into the game for the first time at the end of the first quarter, and he's not fully engaged in the game yet. And all of a sudden the other team goes on a 7-0 run. Like, these things really matter. And one other point I wanted to make was just on the Gordon Jokic power forward, center thing. We see a lot of 5 out. We see a lot of redundancy between the 3 and the 4 in terms of skill sets and positional whatever. It's more homogenous, I feel like, roster construction than it was, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, right? It's a lot of 3-and-D guys play 4, right? If they're not the primary ball handler or the primary wing. And you brought up the perfect pairing. I do want to say that the Milwaukee Bucks several years ago getting Brook Lopez was massive. And it's almost inverse a little bit to Jokic and Gordon, but he provided the rim protection. Giannis, of course, does that as well, but he provided the rim protection defensively, plus he provided the spacing, plus he provides a pick and roll partner at times. And it's like this perfect pairing. And obviously, they won a championship in 2021 with that. The Giannis Lopez thing is important. The other thing I just wanted to note, I just think, the adjustment sometimes from coaches, and this will lead us in the next series, the adjustment sometimes from coaches, they're small things, sometimes they're big things. Love Malone just at times yesterday, just believing in the bench. I thought they were awesome yesterday.
They were great.
And then, going to Friday night again yesterday, Rick Carlisle, there's all this talk after game 2 of the Knicks-Pacers series. Oh, he should have closed with McConnell. He should have closed with McConnell. Nembhard, he's having trouble guarding Jalen. and he comes out and he puts Aaron Nesmith on him. You know, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, you just, why didn't anybody else think that?
Right.
And Aaron Nesmith defensively was awesome in games 3 and 4 in Indy. I mean, just awesome. And the numbers back that up. Jalen's shooting stats with him as the primary defender. He was great, and he set the tone. The big takeaway from yesterday for me, and we talked about this a bunch on the broadcast, and unfortunately we had about almost 2 full quarters to talk about this because it was such a blowout,
right.
is just the incredible discrepancy right now in energy between these two teams. And by energy, sometimes I'm talking about negative energy and positive energy. I'm not talking about this. I'm not talking about body language. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the Pacers, pressure, full court, sometimes 5-man presses, not just the primary ball handler. Like they had an 8-second violation yesterday. And then on offense, trying to turn everything into a track meet. And it was like a rush from the opening tip yesterday. Starters did it for Indy. TJ McConnell comes off the bench. Within 3 or 4 minutes, it's like, whoosh, it's a 20-point game, right? It was just a surge of energy from the Pacers. And look, I think the OG thing, New York has like done incredible stuff with this roster, with this group, with having to be overtaxed physically, sometimes be overtaxed in roles. Guys being asked to do more than they've ever done in their career. And OG's availability to me is the difference in this series. And I don't mean 2-2. I mean going forward. Like, you watched that game yesterday. They've got to turn around. They're going to play tomorrow in the Garden. And they're going to get a lift for sure from that home crowd. But there is a concern right now with the physical toll that all of these injuries, all of these minutes, a bunch of close games. Obviously, yesterday was not, but 8 of their first 9 were clutch games. Like, there's a concern, I think, with the energy level of the New York Knicks.
Well, it's obvious, and you're sitting there, and it's always easier even to see it sitting there courtside. I'm watching that game. I'm seeing the same thing. That looked like a gassed team. Everything was a challenge for them. All movement, getting space, getting back to guard their pace. The number of closeouts and then containments you have to have when you play the Pacers, like that is exhausting. You have to run back first of all to guard against the advanced pass. So first of all, you might have just had a terrible possession and you got bad spacing on it. So now you got weird spacing getting back. You run back, you stop the advanced pass, and then they just start going with these quick hitters, one after another after another. Every guy that touches the ball immediately tries to get downhill on you. And so you've got to, and they're good shooters. So you're full commit to get out to the line, but now they're attacking you off the dribble. So now you got to go from full sprint out down into a stance, slide with them to guard them. There's another kick out. Now you've got to be in help position on the next dribble drive. And then probably you're going to have that one last hard closeout at a 3-pointer or something. That what I just described as one possession. That's tiring, what I just described. If that were me in that position doing all 4 of those things on one possession, that's tiring. To do that every trip, the entire time, and also you're digging from behind like the whole game. It's a little bit easier when the game is like tied or it's 4 either way. It's just a different energy and adrenaline there. When it's just things snowballing against you and you can't do anything offensively, when you're that bad offensively, it just puts you even worse and more compromised positions defensively. They're just short on bodies, man. They're short on energy. If they somehow come back, JJ, and win game 5, and they have, it's going to be let's say a close game. They have enough energy to get through that. The best thing that could have happened to them was the fact that you had guys play like in the 20s in minutes in this game, honestly, because they needed a break from somewhere. And it turns out it could have come in the form of a blowout. But it just looks like all of this stuff, the cumulative effect of all of these injuries, the minutes piling up, the style of play for some of these guys, it looks like right now it has caught up to them. And so we're all sitting here wondering, what is the answer going to be to that in game 5? Even though you're going to get this surge of energy from the building, we get it. MSG is incredible that way, but it looks like Indiana, by the way. That place looked bananas. I mean,
great crowd. Great crowd, Tim.
It was coming through the screen, man. I was like, that is alive. That place is electric right now. And, part of that is, you're down in the series, you're trying to fight back. Part of it is they sense it. Like, this might not just be, hey, we're in this series. Like, we can win this series. We can be in the conference finals. We can taste it. Look at this team. All we have to do is keep our foot on the gas. They don't have enough to be able to stop this surge. And that's what it looked like yesterday. So now we're all going to sit back and see what can the Knicks muster up in terms of energy and toughness and, bodies and getting contributions from other people, maybe surprising contributions that you're going to need in a series like this. I don't know, JJ. Doesn't look good for them right now. I don't know if
I'm not counting them out. I'm not counting them out.
I don't know if they have going to win 4 straight games. Yeah, but
you brought something up that I think is important to note. Like the starters did get a break in the fourth quarter. It was an afternoon game. They got back at a decent hour. They get a full day of rest. Then they get a night game. It was a really quick turnaround from an insanely competitive, insanely physical game on Friday night to then turn back around with a shorthanded group and play Friday afternoon. I'm not making excuses on this, and I'm certainly not making excuses for Jalen either, who's battling this foot injury. We've got all the data on this. We were talking about it during the game. Like, his shot is short right now. Yeah. His lift isn't there. Some of that's the pressure of Nesmith. Some of it maybe is the size of Nesmith relative to Nembhard, and some of it's probably the foot. Like, there's a ton of factors here. Obi Toppin, another guy I just wanted to mention off the bench for the Pacers. Number one, like, him and TJ have this great synergy and stuff, and the fact that he has sort of developed into a reliable 3-point shooter, which he was not when he was drafted. He's a valuable bench rotation player for this team. The style of play for the New York Knicks, they crash the offensive glass, right? They're number one in the regular season in offensive rebounding percentages. They're number one in the playoffs. They took a ton of threes yesterday that didn't go in. Those are long rebounds, and they're crashing, and it created a ton of 2-on-1s and 3-on-2s. And the Pacers, even if they didn't score in those situations, you described perfectly what a typical Indiana Pacers possession is like. So if you're the New York Knicks and you're trying to create offense in the half court, and then you're crashing the glass, and then you're sprinting back, and then you're going through multiple actions on every possession, that's another piece of this whole thing. And look, New York, I don't have the opponent transition opportunities and opponent transition points per possession because I have my phone and I don't have Second Spectrum in front of me. But on NBA.com, they were, number one offensive rebounding team. They were 13th in fast break points allowed. So it's not something that has hurt them necessarily this year. Number one in the league was around 11. They're around 13.8 points per possession. Utah, which by the way was top 2 or 3 all season in offensive rebounding percentage, they were the worst at giving up opponent fast break points. They had that sort of risk reward thing, and they got burned for it. They gave up over 18 points a game in fast breaks. So this stuff, I'm not saying Tibbs is going to tell his guys to turn off the offensive rebounding, but certainly in this series, I think you just have to potentially be a little mindful, potentially. And if they shoot better, then it's a moot point because the ball's going through the basket, right? And you have a chance to get back. Of course, the Pacers, they do a great job. You brought up the throw-ahead pass. They inbounds quick to Hailburton, McConnell. They throw ahead. Boom, they're into action. It's a tough matchup. Yeah.
Really tough matchup. And they're one of those teams that when you first get them early in a series, it's like it's really a difficult thing to adjust to based on your previous round, and because they're so different in the way that they play. I love your point about Hailburton and McConnell. They are so good. Steve Nash, it reminds me of that in that I used to watch Steve Nash and I would marvel at his ability to see the ball coming off of the defensive glass and start to sort of scan the floor to see the right angle to take and where he would have to sprint to so that by the time his teammate got the defensive rebound and turned to look, He wasn't then starting to figure out where to break. He had already started that process. So the ball was delivered and he's got ahead of steam. It's amazing how many times like these guys are over half court in one dribble to two dribbles and they're already up the other end of the floor and they both do it really, really well. By the way, TJ McConnell, I can't say enough about the impact TJ McConnell has had in this series. Like for a backup point guard, right, to have this kind of an impact. They have no answer for him. It's amazing the pressure that he's putting on the New York Knicks and the way he's breaking them down repeatedly. He has been sensational in this series. To your point, 22 fast break points in this game. That's a high number for a playoff game. And that doesn't even count the number of opportunities they had that they didn't convert because they had clean looks that didn't go in on some of those possessions, or that number's up north of 30 in a playoff game. That is very rare. When you combine it with 60 points in the paint, that is just domination. This domination. And we all saw it. I mean, it got out of hand pretty quickly, right out of the gate, really. And the Knicks didn't have any sort of response. They did not have the energy required to be able to dig out of that sort of onslaught to start that game. It's that simple. They'll have a much better response in game 5. There's no question about it. I have no doubt in my mind. So this isn't going to be about how the game starts. This is going to be, I think, a war. It's going to be, I think, a battle to the end. And it's going to be then, do the Knicks have enough at the end of 48 minutes to be able to make the plays they need to down the stretch? That's what I think game 5 is going to come down to. So Pacers, they got this series absolutely played to their liking in the style. The Knicks are able to win 2 of those games despite the fact that the score was up and the pace was up and everything else. So give them credit for that. But these last 2, this is, makes you really start to look at the Knicks and say, where are you going to find it from? The way that they look right now with just fatigue and not enough guys that Tibbs trusts right now to play more minutes off his bench. It's a dire task, man. But the one good thing, it's 2-2 going home. They still have home court advantage in this series. It's 2-2. Best of 3 will be in New York if it goes 7. That's the best news that they have. So let's see what they're going to come up with in game 5.
Last thing on this series, and this is just like a sort of an inside thing or whatever, but Tyrese as a scorer makes such a difference. And he doesn't in a regular season. I don't think he has to do it every night. Like he can have those games where he takes 8 shots and goes for 15 assists. But in the playoffs, they're a better team when he's taking 20 shots a game and he's not getting 12, 13. Like he to me set the tone early in both these games by coming out, looking for his own shot, hunting his own shot. And I talked about this Friday. Rick told us, Rick, by the way, I was thinking about it this weekend because I'm like, so he had Dirk, right? And they played a certain way. And then he had Luka and they played a certain way. And now he has Tyrese and they play a certain way. Like he adapts to the game, certainly to what the game requires, what math requires, but he adapts to who do I have on my team? And he figures out a way, what's the best version of this team? And it was really interesting. So he said to us Friday, he's like, we're just a better team when we play conceptually and random than we do slowing the game down and calling set plays. And so the concepts, and you described it perfectly, the concepts are part of the reason at times when it's slow and you're calling a set play, everybody gets Tyrese to his left. I'm not saying he can't drive left. He's phenomenal going right. One of the best right-hand drivers in the entire NBA. And when it's random, it gives him more opportunities to attack a closeout and get to his right hand, to attack a switch and get to his right hand. And we saw that time and time again in games 3 and 4. OKC, Dallas up 2-1. Any just big thoughts on game 3, game 4, obviously tonight? What does Oklahoma City have to do to get back into this series and avoid going down 3-1?
Yeah, I think a lot of their issues for me in this series have been more offensive issues. They've got to shoot the ball better from the 3. First of all, they had a lot of clean looks the other night that they didn't convert. They've got to make. I know they're not a high volume 3-point shooting team, but go back to game 1. They made 14 in that game. They got their big push and they're able to get away from Dallas basically from the 3-point line in the second half. They're going to have to shoot the ball better from there. This series has been very interesting to me, JJ, because Dallas loses game one. It's clear Luka's he's not close to like physically how he is at his peak. It's obvious. Like he just is having a hard time getting away from Dort, getting away from whoever's on him. And his step back three has left him for the most part. He can still make one here and there, but it's a huge weapon for him because it sets up a lot of stuff for him, his ability to make that shot at a high rate. He just looks so banged up.
Yeah.
And I was concerned after game one, if he continues to look like that and he's not able to make perimeter shots, they're going to have a very difficult time winning this series. Well, if you go and take a look at the last couple of games, I mean, he's 1 for 4 from the three again in the last game, 7 for 17, and they still win the game. They've gotten great contributions out of other people. And PJ Washington, what that guy has done, not only the addition coming to this team in February, it took him a while to find a comfort zone offensively. But even at his most comfortable in the regular season, he has far surpassed that with what he's doing with them now. I mean, he is feeling it, and he is making Oklahoma City pay every single chance that they take to load up on the lane, to put extra bodies in front of Luka when he backs guys down or starts to get off the edge on a ball screen. Kyrie the same. They're kind of shifting over toward him and making those guys play in traffic. They haven't really gone off. You've had other guys do just enough. Tim Hardaway Jr. has been good. PJ Washington's been sensational. So I think Oklahoma City has done enough defensively because role players are having massive nights against them. And that's what you have to live with to a certain extent when you play this team. They've got to be better on the other end of the floor. You've got to get to a better number. 101 points against Dallas is not going to be good enough. And that's what really I thought a lot of what game three came down to. They've got to still feel like they're in pretty good position here to win this series. They can't get too demoralized because they're down 2-1, because I think they've done a lot of really good things against them defensively and the way that they're playing them. I think their offense has to be better.
Yeah, and some of that I think is Dallas's defense, which
definitely was
number one defense in the league the last 20 games. Thought at times in that Clippers series it was just awesome. They offer size, length. If Josh Green comes off the bench, he gives you some energy. He's pressuring the basketball, all that stuff. It's important, I think, in this series because of Oklahoma City's spacing and their desire and their will to drive the basketball. That Dallas's help defense has been awesome, and they've relied on that, and they've made it tough. Like they've made it tough on Shea at times. They've made it tough on Jalen Williams at times. They've really just committed to being in help and living out of rotations. And so some of it, I think, going back to how you described a Pacers possession, is like if Oklahoma City can get into more of that and not just a Shea ISO, right? Not just that, where he's seeing a set defense. They can get more into that quick stuff, which is, typically how they play. I think their offense opens up. I really do.
I liked Dallas to win this series. I was concerned after the first game, the way Luka looked, that was going to be a degenerative thing as the series went on, because he just was not moving well in that game. He had a great start, and then it just got progressively worse as the game wore on. So I was concerned about it, but they're finding ways. They're getting enough out of other guys. Luka maybe doesn't have to be spectacular in this series to win the series. This is a team in Dallas.
To say that? Isn't that wild? And he wasn't spectacular against the Clippers either.
He wasn't. And think about that. So they could end up, look, they got a lot of work to do in this series. I do think the Oklahoma City's not winning this series if they don't win game 4. Like, I don't know. There's some teams I would say, hey, look, if these games have been close and they're down 3-1, I think they're still in it. I don't think you're winning 3 straight games against a Luka-led team if you're Oklahoma City. So this is a must win for Oklahoma City. Luka, this is a team that potentially could get to the conference finals without Luka really having to be spectacular offensively in the first 2 rounds. That's really incredible, and it's a testament to the how they have transformed themselves defensively with length and athleticism, and also I think the sync between Kyrie and Luka, it's better than it's ever been since the day he got there. it's sort of seamless now. And you don't ever feel like awkward or uncomfortable watching them play offensively or wondering, if they're going to figure it out. They have figured it out. They've got that. They've got that in sync now, that they can have games that they win when it's not about them. And we're not talking about them first thing. The first topic can be their defense. It can be PJ Washington or some other player that came up in a big spot that's a role player or supporting cast of those two stars. So this has got a lot of twists and turns left in this series. This was going to be one of the most interesting ones for me if this matchup ever came to fruition, which it did. Oklahoma City's certainly not out of this thing, but they've got to win game 4, and they've got to be better offensively. They've got to make shots against a really good defense. So sometimes that's what it's going to come down to. And I think Oklahoma City left some out there in game 3 that could have made a big difference.
Tim, always a pleasure. Please call more games. Loved you on the call the other night. And we'll talk to you soon, man.
Appreciate you, buddy.
All right. Thanks, man.
See you soon, man.